Hello everybody, today's video tutorial is all about using feathers in millinery, some tips and tricks. And first off, we're going to talk about burning feathers, and this is nothing to do with flames, this is chemical burning. So what I'm going to show you is this technique on a small ostrich feather that I've had for ages and looks a bit tired and tatty, and I don't like the colour. So what we will need is household bleach. So you need some household bleach, just a small amount, put it in a container, and you'll need a brush to brush it on the feather. So here we are. Now what we're going to do is we're going to brush this all over the feather, as you can see, like this. You need to put on a fair bit. You'll also need on standby a jug of clean water to rinse this off. Now the longer you leave the bleach on, the more it will burn parts of the feather off, and obviously it will leach out the colour as well, so it will bleach it. If you've got a colour like this, you'll see as you paint, you'll see the colour coming out and it going a bit sludgy looking, but it'll all be fine in the end. So what you do is you leave it for a moment or two, and then you get your jug of clean fresh water and you wave your feather about in the water to get rid of all the bleach. So, and you'll see the water goes a violet colour, and mainly that's because I used a brown feather. Anyway, so what you do is you rinse it really well to get all the bleach out. And then we're going to dry it on a piece of paper towel, and then we're going to dry it further with a hairdryer. Now when you're drying feathers, you can either use a hairdryer and shake them really well while you're doing it, or you can tie them all into an old pillowcase and put them in the tumble dryer, but tie them in well, otherwise they escape and you can't find them. So dry it with a hairdryer and shake while you're doing it, so that you can shake all the fronds out. And as you'll see, it's burnt away part of the feather and it makes it a lot more ethereal looking. So what I'm going to do is trim this so it's neat and tidy and looks nicer. What I tend to use for trimming a lot of feathers is a rotary cutter, because you get a nice smooth edge. You can use scissors, obviously, and sometimes you need scissors just for the odd stray frond that has escaped. So there we have it, a burnt feather. This next one is a simple feather flower, which can look great on a hat. Often when you buy feathers, you buy them joined together on a long ribbon. They've been glued and stitched onto a long ribbon like this. Now what we're going to need is enough to make our flower. So I normally fold it round and see, depending on the feathers. And you can't do this with anything more than about 4 or 5 inches long. So you can't do it with very long feathers, it doesn't look so good. So I've cut 3 inches off here, and I'm just going to trim part of that ribbon edge off just to make it easier for me to form the flower. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some stamens. You could use beads on wire, or what I've bought here are some craft baubles on wire that I bought in the craft shop in the Christmas sale, and I'm going to use these for the centre. So I'm just going to twist the wires together to stop them all rolling about all over the place, and then I'm going to put them in the centre of the feathers and roll it up. So put them in the centre and roll the feathers round till you get a nice neat effect. And then we're going to use double thread, strong thread, I'm using button thread here, to join these together. And so get them rolled up as tight as you can. So I'm trying to get them as tight as I possibly can before I stitch. So there we are. Wrap your thread around through the knot at the end to get started, and then wrap again very tight and you need to keep doing this a few times so that it's all secure. And then once you've finished, cut off your threads and move your feathers about till you're happy with the look, or your stamens or whatever. And there you have a simple feather flower. Now you can do this with more feathers in the group and it will look bigger and more, you know, bushy. And what I'll probably have to do is trim the end and put a dab of hot glue just to keep it all together. Now this one is trimming feathers. You can do lots of things with feathers. I love feathers. And what I've got here are a couple of cock feathers, cockerel feathers. So often you see tiny little cock feathers. Now I like to buy my feathers in bulk just as they are and then trim them to what I need, because often it's a cheaper way of doing it than buying them individually cut. So I've stripped off most of the spine. Oh, my rotary cutter's not very sharp. Trimmed the top, and now I've got a nice little feather to go into a bunch on a hat. You can make it as small as you like, you can trim it to your own design, and there we have it, a little cock feather. Now here I'm taking another goose feather and I'm neatening it up with the rotary cutter. Always go in the direction of the feather, so turn it around and go the other way. Don't try and go against the grain, so to speak, because it won't work. Now what I'm going to do here is cut straight lines across. Don't cut at an angle, just cut straight lines like that, and then take off the excess. Same again the other side, we're going to match it up. So straight lines, not at an angle. There we are. Then I'm going to strip the rest off. As I say, buying your feathers in bulk and then adjusting them to how you want them is often a cheaper way of doing it, and you can get exactly what you want then. And I might trim the edges because I don't want a diamond. There we are. So that's trimmed into a nice shape as well. Now I'm going to take the fronds off this ostrich feather. I buy ostrich feathers whole with the fronds so that I can take the fronds off and use the spine, and then I've got the fronds for something else. So I've stripped off as many as I want, I'm cutting it, and there I have an ostrich spine, which I can use as it is, or I can spray paint it. Now with the fronds, if they're still attached to part of the spine, I chop that off, and I do the same technique as we did for the flower. I just wrap thread around and around, and then I've got little bunches that I can use at a later date. A spine that I've curled and sprayed gold. Now if you need to make holes in the spines to stitch, the best way to do it is heat a needle till it's really hot and poke it through the spine. It will melt the spine, burn a hole through, and you won't split it. Right, dyeing feathers. When you dye feathers, you can use, well, I mean, you can paint them if you want with ordinary acrylic paints, but we're going to be using traditional acid dye. So this is an acid. Now I need some pale blue feathers for a project I'm doing. So I need gloves, a heat-proof dish, my dye crystals, and my feathers. I only want a tiny amount of dye, as I say, because I'm using, I want pale. If you want a very dark colour, obviously use more dye crystals. Now I'm just going to melt the crystals a bit so that they are fully immersed. And then I'm going to dye, I'm going to dip dye this one just for a change. Now you can paint with the dye, all sorts of things, but what I'm going to do is dip dye this one. So I'm now going to get some boiling water and dip the feather in and swish it about. Now if you want really strong colours, you will have to heat the water very hot, or do it in a pan over the stove. More crystals, more heat, and follow the dye instructions, because this will come out very pale, as you see here. So I've dyed these quite pale. They were taken out the dye bath and dried with the hairdryer. But you can paint them with the dye, as you'll see from these ones in this picture. You can just paint whatever you like on. And this one's been airbrushed to give it a speckled effect. So you can do lots of things with dye. Curling feathers. The easiest way to curl them is with curling tongs. You can use an iron and just iron them into a curl. You can use a pair of scissors, but the easiest way is with curling tongs. Here I'm using goose biots. They curl up very nicely and look very, very good when they're curled up. You need the curling iron quite hot, but as you can see, you get a nice effect. So that's goose biots. This one is peacock eye, and again, if you only take a few fronds and curl them all separately, it comes out very pretty with curly edges. And this is a pheasant feather. Now with these feathers, always curl in the direction of the feather. As I've said before, feathers come in left or right, so curl in that direction. You can't curl the other way. So let's just curl this one round. If you strip one side first, you get a really nice effect as well, but I'm just showing you quickly here how to curl one up. There we are. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Do subscribe because there's lots more to come. Thanks a lot. Bye.